Good afternoon in Maastricht. My name is Tom van Veen. I'm acting pro-rector of this university. And hereby I open this academic ceremony in which Tom Schiefer will defend the academic thesis Innovation Unchanged, Collaboration and Data Analytics for Novel Digital Products and Services. May I invite you, Tom, to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis in 15 minutes.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear Pro-Rector, dear Corona, dear family and friends, it's nice to see you all here today. I'm happy to share the research I've been doing in the previous years with you. And my research is about collaboration between organizations to innovate, and specifically innovations based on digital technologies. And I think digital technologies is a... Oh, sorry. Right button. Digital technologies is a subject that is close to all of us. I think quite literally, I think we don't have to look much further than our left or right pockets to find digital technology in the form of the smartphone. And as you can see, I'm not very digitally happy myself all the time because I'm pressing the wrong button. But this will, I will do this better from now on. And I think these digital technologies have a propensity to generate data. And as also, these digital technologies tend to be connected to other digital technologies, such as smart devices. You can think of a smart watch or a smart lighting that you might have at home. And I think you and I, as consumers, we try to look at these digital technologies and try to apply them in our home to add a bit of convenience to our lives. And companies do something very similar. Companies will look at the available landscape of digital technologies in their surroundings and will try to apply the digital technologies that they can in their surroundings, and thereby looking for novel applications, creating digital innovation. And then this is something that companies cannot do alone. For example, as you can see here in the middle, an article about a newspaper article about smart packaging. Smart packaging means adding a sensor to a package that can, for instance, register the temperature of a package through the supply chain, and thereby replacing, for example, a static expiration date with a more dynamic expiration date. And therefore, companies need to collaborate to implement something like this. You can think in this example, for example, it's about a Norwegian company that wants to implement smart packaging in the Dutch market, and they have to get approval from Dutch authorities. So there is a very little bit of collaboration necessary there. And also, they need to collaborate with producers of food, also with supermarkets. So collaboration is key to get these digital innovations implemented. Also, what is necessary is the ability to analyze the data that these digital technologies generate, as already mentioned. And what I have been researching in the previous years is actually this let's call it a triangle of subjects, so collaboration, data analytics, and digital innovation. And to be more specific, I have been researching collaboration within supply chains and also beyond the supply chain. So as mentioned with this example of Dutch authorities, for example. And also I try to look beyond the horizon of this visual, looking at the future, looking at the chain of successive innovations through time. And I would like to take you to a short tour of my research with the analogy of a movie, because in my experience, the PhD journey has been very much like a movie with an exciting start, a setup where I try to explore the world. And I did that by doing a systematic review of existing literature. Then in the second part of the research, it was more the adventure stage where the story unfolded, and there I went out there, I collected data, talked to a lot of companies. So that is the observation-based research part of my work. And then in the third act, the resolution of the story. So this is where I would like to share some findings and some of the insights I've acquired over the years with you here today. So starting with this first act. So I've been looking at these different subjects, right? This triangle of subjects. And I did a systematic review of literature. I looked at an online search engine to search for literature about these three subjects. And I found precisely 1,200 hits about these three subjects. And then through some filtering stages, I eventually ended up with 114 articles that I included in this systematic review. And based on those 114, I then had a look at the relationships in this triangle. And what I found there is, first of all, that the most frequently appearing relationship is the effect of supply chain collaboration on digital innovation. And this is not very surprising, I think, because companies, they need each other, they need each other's resources and skills to actually get these innovations working. And in addition to this, looking at the other relations in this triangle, I found actually most of the relationships with the exception of the effect of digital innovation on big data analytics. And then as a next step, I had a look at different antecedents, so which aspects have an influence on these subjects. And there was one overarching antecedent that I can report about, which is competence. And this is about the availability of resources, skills, and processes in the supply chain that can be configured as a source of competitive advantage. And I also looked at effects in this between these subjects, of these subjects. And some I would like to share. For example, operational performance, which is about enhancements in the timing, cost, quality, flexibility of products and services, as well as value creation was also an outcome of two of these subjects. So I had a picture now of the relationships between these subjects in the literature, but I of course also wanted to know what is it that we then still don't know. And that is the second part of the story. So I had some question marks, for example, with respect to this value creation, because based on the 114 articles I had a look at, the interpretation of value was actually not very clear. So that is something I wanted to investigate further, and I will get back to this on the next slide. And the same goes for the collaborative process that companies have to work in order to get these innovations working, stage by stage. And I followed these different stages of this development of innovation in my research. And also, I would like to know more about the different types of innovations, because companies typically have small innovation projects, larger innovation projects through time, and how to sequence these innovations through time was also part of my research. Then going to the second act, so the adventure part of the research. Here I worked in two projects, so a smart packaging project and a Navy services project. And within this smart packaging project, I looked at three different cases. So a food case, a health case, a high-tech case. And in each of these cases, they consisted of a handful of companies who were working together to develop these digital innovations in the form of smart packaging in these specific contexts. And I also worked in a Navy services case, and this case was a single case, and it was about these companies were very much interested in sequencing these innovations through time, and here they were interested in developing services based on digital technologies. So let me zoom in a little bit more into these two projects and these four different cases. So starting with the smart packaging project. I followed the development process of smart packaging through various stages, starting with the idea stage, which was about the brainstorming between these organizations to think of feasible smart packaging solutions. Then I had a look in the scope and business case stage of the development, where these companies were focusing a little bit more, specifying what is it that we really want to measure with this smart packaging technology. Then me and together with co-authors, we were involved in development and the testing stage, where these companies were working on workable concepts, the demos, for example, to get these smart packages, to get working concepts of those. And eventually, they also prepared for the launch of these smart packages in the implementation environment, in the supply chain. And I collected data in various ways, right? So, for example, interviewing the companies, we had multiple focus groups where multiple partners were present at the same time, and also multiple company visits and many meetings with the companies. And one thing, an initial insight I would like to share based on my experience in this project is that maybe it sounds a bit simplistic, but digital innovations is very complicated. And that is because we have to deal with this development environment that you see here on the left. So we have a group of companies that are developing digital innovations in the form of smart packaging, in this case together. But we also have to deal with the implementation environment visualized on that side. So that would be the supply chain. So the producers of food, for example, for a food case, a supermarket, and we have to find alignment of these different networks. And what I notice is that, there is, some of the partners are in both of these networks, but some of them are also only involved in the early or the latter stages. So it is a complex process, and it's also an adaptive process. Then moving to the Navy services case. So here the companies were interested in sequencing these innovations through time. And to give an example of this, consider the radar system on board of a military vessel. So what you see here is a curve representing, for example, the first 15 years of the life cycle of a vessel. And what would typically happen is the crew gets to learn better and better how to use this technology, so the performance rises, but until a certain performance limit, the capability of this radar system to detect enemies. And then typically you would have some incremental innovations after 15 years. They are called midlife updates. Small improvements of this radar system, and then typically after 30 years you would have a new vessel with a fully state-of-the-art radar system. And a complication that these organizations face is that there are ever more digital technologies on board of vessels. And these digital technologies require more and more updates. And that is tricky for these organizations because they are used to having these 15 and 30-year update cycles. And so that was definitely a topic for discussion with these companies, and I did that through interviews, workshops, and many company visits and many meetings. Then moving to the resolution stage, so the findings and the insights that I would like to share with you. First of all, I found some innovation prerequisites, so some conditions for innovation. And I found here two dimensions, so for the data sharing and integration among the partners in the collaboration, and also the functional and innovation orientation in the contracts that they establish. And specifically for the high scenario, so high data sharing and integration and high functional innovation orientation in contracting. For these, I specifically thought with the companies, this was action research, of various strategies that they could use. And I found 5, but I will just share 2 with you here now. So one is modular service design, which means creating a generic backbone of services that you can then reuse for multiple service developments. And also functional obsolescence management, which refers to identifying and replacing parts that might still work, but they are no longer functionally relevant. And you can think, for example, about an old Nokia phone you might have lying at home, right? It still works, but it no longer suffices. So we have to proactively identify these components and replace them. I also found various innovation obstacles in both of the projects, so hurdles that we have to try to climb, and one of them is the timing, and that relates to what I already mentioned, these 15, 30-year update cycles, for example. That's a difficult challenge to overcome because technologies require more, often, updates. Also, money is, of course, always a limiting factor. So we need the funds, and this can be a limiting factor for the amount or the size of the innovations. Also, the data sharing was an issue in many of the cases I investigated. And that companies tend to be a bit protective of their own data or unsure how to solve together, how to build this data lake that everyone can access to and who then owns the data, for example. So challenges. And the last thing is commitment. So yeah, is there some fire in these organizations to actually, do they believe in digital innovation, right? And that was also a relevant factor. And I would like to get back to this on the next slide also. Of course, we try to jump these hurdles. And if we can do so, we can try to unlock innovation values. And several innovation values emerge from my research. And this is something I specifically investigated in the food case, health case, high-tech case, so the smart packaging project. And what I found is various values, as indicated here. You see some values are specific for the high-tech case, some are more overlapping with other cases. And there were 2 values that actually emerged in each of the 3 cases that I investigated. And that refers to the visibility, so getting insights into conditions of goods throughout the supply chain, as well as waste reduction. So that can mean reducing scrap materials, but can also mean more lean, more efficient operations. And then finally, I had a look, are these organizations that work together in these development networks, are they now really fit for digital innovation? And in order to answer this, I had a look at the existing literature and an existing theory about information processing. And there they say that we need to have a match between the capacities for information processing and on the other hand, the requirements of information processing. We need a match between those. And based on my research, I thought, yeah, there's actually a dimension missing here. And that's something I identified already in the setup research, the systematic literature review, and I could also verify later with the organizations. There is a third dimension, which is more the stance, which relates relates a bit more to this commitment, right? The willingness of organizations to actually share and process information that is also very relevant. So we can distinguish there also between low and high. And based on these three dimensions, I could position the different cases that I've investigated as such. So the food case and the health case, and the screen is a little bit broken, but there is a Navy services case in the bottom right. So for those three cases, the judgment is, yeah, they are not fully fit for digital innovation. Because they don't have this match between the capacities and requirements in combination with a high stance for information processing. And for one of the cases, the high-tech case, this was actually the case. So there was a match between capacities, requirements in combination with the stance for information processing. And my message is that companies should review their own position. So what are my capacities, requirements, stance, but also to be very aware of the position of their collaboration partners. What is their capacities, requirements, and stance? And we need to have alignment among these different organizations. And if we can achieve this, then we can truly unchain digital innovations successfully, and then the future will look bright. Thank you for listening, and I would like to give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. The opposition will be opened by Professor Oudekerke-Schreuder, Professor of Customer-Centered Service Science, and Professor Oudekerke-Schreuder was the chair of the assessment committee of this thesis.
Thank you very much, Prorector. Dear candidate, first of all, congratulations on a very interesting dissertation. Also, congratulations to your supervisory team. And thank you for sharing this fascinating movie with us. Excuse me. I think it's impressive how you started your career as a researcher at ETEL, got to a lecturer teaching position, and then in the end came back and closed the circle as a researcher, or reopened the circle, as you showed also in your graph. Part of your dissertation was conducted during the pandemic, and that probably didn't make your life a lot easier. My question relates to that, and the question is as follows. If we look at your dissertation, your main concepts are digitalization, collaboration, we have smart packaging, we have healthcare. And if I remind myself of the pandemic and the daily news items, there was a lot going on broken supply chains, lots of problems with, for instance, face masks in healthcare. But even now, after the pandemic, we really have a difficult time getting all the medicines we need for the patients that are dependent on medicine. And as a chair of the assessment committee, it's my honor to have a bit of a holistic warming up question. And therefore, I would like you to reflect on the knowledge you gained in your dissertation and what your advice would have been back in the pandemic to prevent the shortage of face masks, as a very concrete example. And if we move it to 2024, what would be your advice to the government or the Minister of Health, incoming minister, to prevent medicine shortage? Looking forward to your reflection.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for the kind words and also for your question. So if I understand correctly, the question is about how can we prevent these medicine shortages by making, maybe use of these digital innovations, right, as research. And I completely agree that is possible. And I would like to refer specifically to smart packaging and also to the values of smart packaging that I found in the research. And what the organizations told me is that this smart packaging can, for instance, lead to higher visibility, right, as mentioned, but also to more automation and traceability of what we are ordering in the supply chain. And I think that such a smart package can in that sense remove some of the perhaps unnecessary human links, right? I mean, it doesn't sound very pleasant, but sometimes we can replace humans with some automation, right? So, for example, in a medical environment, medical personnel, of course, wants to work with patients, right? That is their passion. They are not very interested in inventory management, you could say. And rightly so. And I think with an innovation like smart packaging, we can make sure that these hospitals, for example, don't have to register with forms manually how many units of a certain medicine should we order from a supplier, but this can happen automatically. So the smart package can detect, I am now opened, for example. That was specifically the functionality of smart packaging in that case. So being able to determine, am I open or closed, or am I taken from a shelf or not? And if we can automatically register this, then we can also, the smart packaging can basically become an agent in this complex system by making automatic decisions. Basically, the smart package can make the decision, I am now going to place an order from a supplier, and then we don't need this human delay. And I think by having, if we would do that not only with the first tier supplier, but with also second tier, third tier suppliers, we can have much more instant reordering to get our inventory positions where we want them to be. And so basically we get more complete information in the whole chain, and that always helps to prevent shortages. And I think that last sentence is of course then also referring to the specific question you asked, how can we prevent these shortages? So I think we need to have a full insight in the whole supply chain of where is all the inventory and how much additional production do we need in very early stages to cover the demand in a hospital, for example.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to follow up on that because I think your answer basically says, okay, smart packaging is a solution. I understand why. Back then we were facing a crisis. Yeah. And smart packaging was not a solution. So could we also think in terms of collaboration as one of your key constructs in the dissertation as a solution? Or is your answer, well, we can prevent it in the future if we benefit more from smart packaging, but back then in the crisis, smart packaging was probably not the solution we were looking for or that was feasible?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I agree. So let's first of all establish that smart packaging during that crisis was not yet implemented in that environment, right? So which effect it would have had specifically, it remains a little bit questionable, but I completely agree that I don't think that if we would have had smart packaging, I don't think we would not have had a shortage of face masks, right? I mean, I completely agree with this. And that is because we are talking here about a major disruption in the chain, and that will always lead to friction and shortages, right? So that is, I don't think I can say that the digital innovations that I've been researching would cover that fully. No way, right? So, but it can contribute. It can help. And if we would have several of these innovations that all help a bit, then maybe we can reduce the shortage of being 1 million to maybe 500,000, right? And then still, it could help people.
Thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor De Meter. Professor De Meter is head of the Supply Chain Management Department at Corvinus University of Budapest. Professor De Meter was member of the assessment committee of the thesis and sees online. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. So I also would like to congratulate to you and your supervisors for your excellent work and thank you very much for this insightful presentation and also for the interesting thesis. It was really enjoyable to read it. And my question regards also this smart packaging. As we know that one of the promises of digitalization is to integrate the horizontal and vertical processes, and this smart packaging solution is a typical horizontal integration, what we can see there. And as such, can you generalize your findings to collecting the most important success factors of collaboration for these kind of data-driven digital innovations in the supply chain? So I am interested in the success factors. Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and for your question.
So if I understand correctly, your question is about the integration of smart packaging specifically within the existing environment where it is implemented. So the integration of this technology with other technologies. And I think...
No.
No?
No, my question is if you can generalize this for horizontal lines, so not in the smart packaging, but beyond smart packaging to any other solutions. If companies start to collaborate and use data and do digital innovation to try to integrate their processes with their partners, what insight you can give to them to generalize this knowledge about the partners, about the process of how this goes, what they have to be aware of when they start these kind of collaborations.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. So the ability to generalize is to integrate these processes for other technologies. I think it is. Yeah. Let me first of all state that generalizability is not was not a key target for the research, right? So the insights provided in chapter 3 are specifically for smart packaging. But of course, I understand the question. And I think it's also interesting to think about this. So how this would, whether these different stages and these different steps that are described also in chapter 3, whether they would also be applicable to other contexts. And I think, the answer is partially yes. So I think partially they can be relevant also for different contexts. And that is because also in different environments, it boils down to the companies collaborating to develop, in this case, smart packaging, but it can also be different applications. So some of these obstacles, for example, and also the drivers of engagement of smart packaging may hold for different technologies and in different contexts. But there are also specific insights about smart packaging that probably will not hold. And then for example, I'm referring to specifically for health case, for food case, we talk about reducing expiration. And this seems to me like a very specific value for smart packaging solutions that probably is not generalizable to other domains. And then I'm looking at my notes if I covered your questions, but maybe I didn't. So if I didn't cover something, please help me.
Yeah, well, probably I was interested in issues that, for example, what kind of knowledge level the different partners need in order to be successful at the end, because one of your cases, this food case, indicated that they have so heterogeneous knowledge about the things that probably that was one of the obstacles that they had to stop the process. So probably that might be one success factor for me if I try to answer this question. So these are these kind of questions that I was interested in.
For the clarification, I'm glad to take over from the answer from there. So I agree. Indeed, in this food case specifically, we had very heterogeneous knowledge, which means that these companies were not all speaking the same language, not literally, but they had some difficulties in understanding each other in this collaborative process because they come from very different backgrounds and perspectives. And this indeed was in this case, I agree, one of the obstacles why this case was not successful. On the other hand, I also would like to stress a bit of a paradox here. On the other hand, we also need this heterogeneity in knowledge, right? We also need these different knowledge insights from different industries to actually successfully integrate these different skills and competences of the organizations to result in better, more valuable digital innovations. So I see a bit of a paradox here that we actually need this heterogeneous knowledge of different organizations on the one hand, but on the other hand, the alignment on the business case is much easier based on the research that I did in clan innovation networks with a more homogeneous knowledge among the organizations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
The position will be continued by Professor van der Valk. Professor van der Valk is Professor of Purchasing and Supply Chain Management at the Tilburg University.
Thank you, Mr. Prorector. Thank you also, my dear colleague. I'm also a bit technologically challenged, as you can tell. So you're not alone at this event. Dear candidate, also on my behalf, warm compliments regarding the doctoral thesis that you have delivered, also compliments to the supervisory team. And I think you've addressed a very important research topic, which I specifically regard from the perspective of collaboration, both within but also in between buyer-supplier dealings, whether those are transactions or projects or innovation activities. And I think that typically the focus of buyers and suppliers is much on the work at hand, and less so perhaps on what that work actually means as part of the larger whole, so to say. I also think that buyers and suppliers typically do not explicitly take this larger whole as a starting point for deciding on actions and activities. So I think by the work that you are advancing, and also particularly the technology lifecycle perspective that you are proposing, that you may drive just that, having more focus on the present in light of the future. And as such, I've read this dissertation with great interest. Thank you. Now to my questions. I've got multiple, but I've been asked, of course, to start with one, so I will do that. And my question pertains to Chapter 2, and specifically the theoretical perspective that you have adopted, being information processing theory. Now, based on the results of your chapter, you conclude that for the collaboration, analytics, innovation triangle, not only information processing capacities and requirements are important, but also what you call information processing stance, which you define as the willingness of organizations to share and utilize information to enable effective decision making. Now, you also identify various antecedents to your key concepts, and there you also specifically mention stance to be related, amongst others, to governance, to organizational orientation, and to strategy. And at a certain level, I can relate to this. I can see how. Yet, particularly informal governance or relational governance typically involves notions of trust, but also notions of what we call relational or cooperative norms. And specifically, the latter also features a concept which is called information sharing. So I would like you to elaborate on how your view on stance connects or relates to relational governance. Is one reflected in the other? Is it somehow similar, but perhaps from different literature streams? Or do you consider them actually fundamentally different, and if so, how? And actually similar for organizational orientation, where you also refer to values and norms of collaboration. How does that specifically differ from what we know from the traditional inter-organizational governance literature?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for the kind words and also for your question. So if I have to reflect on indeed this role of stance, which we identify indeed as this third dimension, capacities, requirements, stance, and I have to reflect on the relational governance, trust factors, for example, companies sharing information. Of course, this is related. Right? Let's clarify that first of all. So indeed, this stance factor is about the willingness to share information, and if we think about relational governance and trust, that relates to the willingness, right? If there is trust between these organizations, then they will be willing to share information. I think a bit of the novelty in the research here, of course, first of all, as a contribution to the existing theory, right? So if we look at the organizational information processing theory, that only consists of these two dimensions, capacities and requirements. So in the context of this theory, I think adding this stance factor is a necessary spotlight for this factor that is otherwise not included. And I think that so I agree with you to conclude that this trust factor relates to this information processing stance, but we need to highlight this more. And I also shared that, maybe some relevant to share that. So this is a result, a finding from an insight from this setup stage, the chapter 2. But I also shared these insights with the companies at a later stage. So in the smart packaging case, for example, and for them, they definitely recognize this. Okay, yes, indeed, capacities are relevant, requirements are relevant, but yes, this stance is maybe even the most relevant of all. So I think it is important to highlight this factor more than has been done previously.
I tend to agree with this, in the importance of this concept, and also specifically from an organizational point of view. You're focusing a lot on in your answer on the trust part, but my interest is specifically also into the norms part, where you have this concept of information exchange, which can also typically be organized through contracts, for example, where you make agreements regarding what kind of information is being exchanged, with what frequency, and those kinds of matters. And I wonder just to what extent, for example, willingness would be required for having those norms, having them manifested in contracts, or perhaps having them more implicitly. So if you do not mind, I would like you to also focus a bit more on the norms aspect of relational governance in your answer.
Yes, certainly. So thank you. So this norms aspect, so related to the information sharing, information exchange in the contract agreements, I think this is yes, we need this, right? So the willingness, as mentioned in the stance argument, is actually we need this first in order to establish these norms in the governance. So we need, this is, I think, we can call this also a condition or a prerequisite. To have this willingness between these organizations in order to be able to establish these norms. Maybe it is also reverse, in my view, that if we establish these norms, maybe that will also trigger additional willingness to share. Right. So I think maybe there is a bit of a bidirectional relationship, in my view.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Kloot. Professor Kloot is Professor of Strategic Management at the Open University in Heerlen, and Professor Kloot was member of the assessment committee of this thesis.
Thank you. So, dear doctoral candidate, I've read your thesis with great pleasure and interest. You've analyzed the relationship between collaboration, data analytics, and digital innovation. So I think this study enlarges our understanding of a very important phenomenon. So you really make a valuable contribution to the field. So my compliments for that. However, despite your rich analysis, I still have some questions left. Well, one of these questions is related to chapter 4. And in that chapter, you state that collaboration is essential, right, for continuous innovations that require comprehensive knowledge sharing across the value chain or supply chain. And we know that trust plays an important role in that respect. We know from previous research that in collaborations featuring high levels of trust, companies also tend to show higher levels of interactions, such as knowledge sharing. But you also mention in your chapter 4 that the collaboration between organizations involved in these continuous service innovation is subject to legally prescribed procurement methods, such as the public tenders. And these tenders can hinder close cooperation with suppliers in the continuous service innovation context. Because as the customer, you cannot work with suppliers on an innovative service continuously. You can work with them today, but continuation of the collaboration depends also on the outcome of the future tender process. Right? So I would argue that a tender process then also can hinder the buildup of trust. And trust is a reciprocal process. It builds incrementally over time. So previous studies also have shown that in relationships that are temporary, trust is likely to be problematic. There's no guaranteed continuation of the collaboration. You cannot build it up. So consequently, I see a little bit of tension between the willingness to share knowledge based on trust in these long-term relationships and applying the tendering process. In particular, in your case study in chapter 4, you analyzed a network where relations are rooted in trust, gained over a prolonged history of interactions, right? So my question is related to this. I wonder to what extent then your findings depend on the fact that trust is present in the case that you studied. And second, if your findings are contingent on the fact that trust is present, how generalizable then are your findings for public tender collaborations where trust is absent? And so can you explain which parts of your findings are still generalizable and which parts are not?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for the kind words and also for your question. So reflecting on indeed the willingness to share information related to trust, and then tenders on the other hand. And indeed, in the chapter I refer to this because indeed I think tendering could have been also one of the obstacles I mentioned here on the slides, right? Because I think it is indeed hindering the build of trust. In the case of Chapter 4, the organizations involved in this collaboration had a long collaborative history. Yeah. So I think based on the insights I got from them and also based on my own impression, I would say that they indeed, trust was definitely present in this relation, in their collaboration. And then the question was specifically which part of the results are then generalizable? And
to what extent do you think then are your findings biased or depending on the fact that trust already was there? And based on that you got particular findings, but are they then still generalizable to public tenders where trust is absent? Or are certain parts generalizable and others not?
Yes, I think, so as mentioned before, generalizability was not for me a focus in my research, right? So the focus was on explicating the detailed processes that happened in these different cases. So if I have to reflect on this, and indeed I agree that because these cases were built on trust, that already plays an effect in these in this research. And I cannot say that I can expect this to be also generalizable to other cases. I think we need to have a new follow-up research, maybe of a case in which there is not this collaborative history and trust, to investigate this further and to answer this question, right? So I feel, I wouldn't feel good to say now, yes, I think it is generalizable or not, if I don't know, right? So my suggestion would be to first perform research in a different case, then to compare it to the case that I already investigated, and then we can give a verdict on this.
Okay, but do you think particular elements of your results? Do you think that for example, you talk about exploration, exploitation relationships. Mm-hmm. I can imagine that some things that you found for these two separate collaborations can be generalizable even if trust is absent. And normally you explore with weak ties, but you exploit with strong ties.
Yeah. If I reflect, for example, on figure 4.5, which shows different types of collaborative data-driven services on page 122, I think if we look there at the axis, so we talk about data sharing and integration among customers, I think this is dependent on trust, right? Okay. So we need trust in order to actually get to this data sharing and integration. If you look at the other axis, that's more contractual axis, right? So that shows the functional innovation orientation agreed upon in contracting. I think that might not be that dependent on the trust levels, because that is stuff that is agreed on in contracting, right? So maybe even if you don't trust these collaboration partners, you can make agreements in the contract. Yeah. So if I can use that as a specific example, I would say that one axis is indeed dependent on trust, whereas the other axis is not.
Okay, yeah, clear. Thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Maar. Professor Maar is Professor in Digitalization and Marketing at this university.
Thank you, Projekte. Dear candidate, congratulations to you and also your supervisory team for submitting your PhD. I think you're unchained, indeed a very important topic, timely. And congratulations, it's very accessible, it's a very nice read, it has clear recommendations, and you already published in an excellent journal, and more to come. My question is about the wider concept of collaboration. Mm-hmm. And similar to my colleague, I will start with the first question, and then maybe we can build up on that. So decades ago, we started with questions on teamwork, then we started to collaboration beyond departments, between departments, then we went outside of organizations, and now we talk about ecosystems, innovation. So it seems, there's no actor left anymore to include, right? So the question is, are we nearing an end of research on collaboration? Which is, of course, not good news for people that are focusing on that research path, That would be my first question.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and your question. No, I do not think that we are ending the end of the road of research with respect to collaboration. And I think the reason for saying that is that, as indicated in chapter 3, where we observed as researchers that we have basically two different types of collaborative networks working together partially, but also partially independently. I was actually quite surprised by this in the research. What I mean specifically, we have this development network of digital innovation, several companies working together to develop the digital innovation in the form of smart packaging. And we have the implementation environment, the supply chain in which the innovation is actually implemented. Mm-hmm. And that typically happens after the development process. I was hoping or expecting that we already have the existing knowledge that these collaborative partners are perhaps ideally fully overlapping. Mm-hmm. Because we need to have all the awareness of all the relevant stakeholders and their perspectives while developing the digital technology, the digital innovation. And this was not the case, right? So typically you would have one or two companies in both of these environments, but the rest was only involved in either development or only involved in the implementation environment. I think that there is definitely a lot of room for improvement and research there, because that is also specifically something that I didn't see much in the literature that I read. That this is basically the practice, right? So to develop with some partners and then to implement with in different environment with some different partners. And in my view, this is related actually to how do these digital innovations get established frequently in consortia. Right? And these consortia have a certain bag of money that has to be divided over the partners involved. And the more partners you add, the less each partner might receive in terms of funding. So when I was thinking about this the previous weeks, I thought actually that this setup of consortia is of course very valuable, right? Don't get me wrong. I think we need these consortia to also trigger companies to be active in innovation and to do in their R&D and to explore. But it might also be a limiting factor in the sense that it keeps the circle of involved parties maybe smaller than if this would not have been in a consortium. And that relates then also to the motivation. Why are these companies actually in these consortia, right? So perhaps they are in the consortia, a bit to free ride, to just see how it goes, and if it goes well, we really dedicate. So that relates again to this willingness, basically, right? So why are these organizations in these consortia?
Right. So there's hope, for more research. That is, at the same time, you also point into a second element for, I think there's some of the drawbacks of collaboration, right? And actually I wanted to have my second question around that, so I'm not going to do that, but zoom a little bit deeper into a particular element on it. I'm particularly interested in how can you assure if partners work together that we have a right distribution or sharing of value in that. So I see that in project 3 or chapter 4, there are certain mechanisms. You think about strategic contracts, you see about strategic agreements. What are good governance mechanisms in order to assure that we actually have a good sharing of value, which helps you, and I think we've seen that also in the research, which helps you to make it more sustainable, the collaboration, and helps you after an initial honeymoon phase. Where everybody is happy to work together, to also to continue that and bring actually the main benefits out of this collaboration. So I'm looking for elements of value creation and value sharing.
Thank you for the question. I think a very interesting question to think about, because the difficulty in getting a distribution of shared value is. So I'm only making it more complicated now, my apologies for this, but it is because I think the value that companies extract from the collaboration varies. So they don't experience the same value to extract from this collaborative partnership. And to give an example, one company might be involved in such a smart packaging development to contribute to a sustainable development goal that it set itself. Another party, maybe the logistics organization, sees an opportunity to refine its inventory management and to make better choices, faster choices to order from suppliers. So they will experience different values among the different organizations involved. So the size of the value that each organization experiences will vary. I think we cannot get around that. The only thing that we can do is, relates a little bit to this governance in your question, I think, is we can of course look for mechanisms to make sure that every party can extract the value that it is after, right? And for me, this would start with very simple things, early in development processes to also express what is it that each of the organizations is after, right? What is the value that it sees, the potential it sees for the digital innovation being developed? Of course, we need then an environment in which companies feel free and also trust each other, that they can also share this, of course, right? I see there are also limits there. But for me, it would start with things like this. We have to map the different perspectives of the different organizations, also because it can redirect our focus in this development process if we notice, hey, there is a party that is not really on board because they don't really see much value yet, right? Then I think this deserves attention, because if we don't give attention to this, then I think, so in the projects that I was involved in, one project was terminated or failed, as you could say, and 2 were successful. But if we don't pay attention to these kind of factors, then I think the balance will tip more towards unsuccessful development processes where organizations don't feel recognized, that the value that they are after is also actually comes true.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Quintens. Dr. Quintens is a senior lecturer at the Department of Marketing and Supply Chain Management at this university.
Dear candidate, dear Tom, also my compliments for your dissertation. It was a well-written piece of work. My question is about chapter 3, and I was triggered by one of your propositions. And I would like to ask one of your panelists to stand up and to read proposition number 4 out loud.
Costs per unit hamper large-scale implementation of digital innovation in the form of smart packaging, especially when the unit costs of packaged products are low.
Thank you. So the proposition stresses the significance of cost considerations in the business model, and it advocates especially for implementation when smart packaging costs per unit are low compared to the value of the units that have to be packaged. So this poses, of course, a significant challenge for companies that have high packaging costs. So how would you include that in the future strategies of these companies? Should they invest in innovations in smart packaging, or should they just wait and see what happens in the future with other companies, and when the costs are getting lower of these innovations, then jump on that train? How would you see the future of especially these companies that have high costs for their packaging compared to the value of their product?
Esteemed opponent, thank you for the kind words and also for this question. So if I have to reflect on indeed the high cost of packaging compared to the value of the product, right? That is what the question is about. I think you start your question by referring to the high cost of packaging and how we might lower these costs. In my answer, I would actually like to start with the other part, which is the value of what we are packaging. Because that is for me a crucial element, right? So in the food case that we researched, we were, for instance, looking at packaging supermarket salads. Yeah, well, the value of those is maybe 1 or 2 or 3 euros. And then the value, the cost of the packaging, that it varies on the amount of smart packages that you actually order to be produced, right? And that varies a lot. So we are talking about costs of maybe 10 cents or 20 cents if we would order 100,000, 200,000 smart packages, and but the cost would be maybe 2 or 3 euros per smart package if we order only 1,000 units. Right, so there is a huge variability in the cost of smart packaging. So I don't think it's necessarily a matter of waiting until future points in time before investing in smart packaging. But I think, because of course over time it might still get cheaper, right? I recognize that. But I think that the major gain to be held in terms of the cost of the packaging is to order large quantities. Right? Because then if you really commit, then you can indeed reach relatively low costs per unit. Having said that, of course, there are applications. Of course, looking back is easy. If I now look back on the smart packaging case, the food case with the supermarket salads, if I would be involved there again from day one, I would probably ring the alarm bell at the start, right? Because I don't think this is a feasible. You don't get a feasible business model. Even if you would get 10 cents cost of smart packaging, it is still too much, because that might be the entire profit margin of this product. So I think it starts with looking for feasible, high value, relatively high value items, such as maybe meat, right? That is already more high value than the supermarket salad, or maybe alcoholic units. And then for these units to commit to larger quantities. But this is of course also scary for organizations, because they prefer to work with pilots, small quantities to test before committing to larger quantities. So maybe then they should then first see it as a test run that will definitely not be profitable, but just to see how it works. And then once they are convinced of the values to be extracted from the different organizations, that's what I would like to stress, then they can commit as a collective to this solution. And that refers also a little bit to what I just answered to highly esteemed Professor Dominic Maar, because we need to have this alignment of all these organizations in this collaborative effort. And if this is not the case, then we also don't get to success.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have time for a second round, and I will start again with Professor Oudekerke-Schreuder.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. In the interest of time, I'll keep it short. One of the conclusions of your chapter 4 is that continuous service innovation is built upon innovation orientation. If we move out of your contexts and move to higher education, there is a continuous debate on internationalization now. Mm-hmm. And if universities have to continuously innovate, innovation orientation is important. How can the faculty board or the university board foster innovation orientation? Looking forward to your reflection.
Thank you for this question, highly esteemed opponent. So if I have to reflect on university board, how it can foster this innovation orientation, I think a first important step is to make sure that staff, that faculty is involved in, basically like I have been able to do in the previous years with co-authors, to be involved in these innovation development projects, right? So if it is smart packaging or robotics or artificial intelligence, I think it's important to get a good sense of what are the values that these different innovations can provide. And
you may finish your sentence.
So I think it's relevant that the organizations look what are the values that they can provide. We as researchers, of course, try to share that with the companies, but we can also reflect on that for our own organization, right? So maybe taking a more an introspective view, but that I have to put the dot here.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, you have indeed put the dot, because Tom Schiefer, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
Please all rise.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the line, I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die.
On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off.
Take the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future than we go for. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile.
jou kan. Ik wil niet zijn
Tom Schiefer, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Vos is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor, Professor Vos, to now take the floor.
Belooft u, dat altijd volgens de beginselen van wetenschappelijke integriteit te werk zult gaan, eerlijk, zorgvuldig, transparant, onafhankelijk en verantwoordelijk. Dat is mooi. Krachtens de, dat stond er niet op. Krachtens de bevoegdheid die ons door de wet toegekend volgens het besluit van de commissie hier vertegenwoordigd verklaar ik u hierbij, Tom Schiefer, tot dokter te bevorderen en u alle rechten te verlenen die daaraan volgens wet en gewoonte zijn verbonden. Ten bewijze hiervan overhandig ik u nu, de beul door rector, secretaris en overige leden van de promotiecommissie ondertekend en met het grootzetel van de universiteit bevestigd.
Dan is het nu tijd voor de laudatio.
Dank u wel. Thank you, pro-rector. Esteemed Dr. Schiefer. Beste Tom, klinkt beter. Let me of course start by congratulating you on this fantastic milestone. And next, with apologies to the non-Dutch people in the audience, we are going to do this laudatio in Dutch. En ja, ik zei bewust we. Want collega Robert Zuurmond en ik gaan dit samen doen. We hebben onze capes vandaag niet bij ons. Nou ja, weet je. Maar we zijn wel heel vereerd met onze nieuwe bijnaam in het voorwoord van jouw proefschrift. Bartman en Robbie. Jawel. Bovendien zagen we een paar weken geleden bij de promotie van collega, oud-collega Dr. Ruud Wetsels ook een duo laudatio van de promotoren. Maar die leek niet echt te zijn afgestemd. Aangezien afstemming binnen ons vakgebied cruciaal is, zie ook jouw proefschrift, hebben wij dit natuurlijk wel gedaan. En we hebben ook een heus motto voor deze laudatio. Dit najaar wordt ons team versterkt met een collega uit India. En die binnen ons vakgebied gekend is onder de bijnaam TT. En al associërend vonden Robbie en ik dat een prima motto. Typisch Tom.
Ja, en typisch Tom, dat is in de eerste plaats teaching Tom. Tom heeft al een lange geschiedenis in ons departement als docent. En toen ik hier net begon, was Tom mijn steun en toeverlaat in het organiseren van het vak Fundamentals of Supply Chain Management. Waarvoor nog steeds veel dank. Tom heeft altijd, en ook nu hij het vak zelf coördineert, alles tot in de kneepjes verzorgd. Zoals dit jaar voor het eerst het examen ook daadwerkelijk af voor de deadline van de examencommissie. Typisch Tom is alles graag goed geregeld hebben, alles op orde, zodat je niet voor verrassingen komt te staan. En ik ben blij dat we nog vele jaren langer zullen mogen profiteren van deze kwaliteiten binnen ons departement en het onderwijs in supply chain management.
Ja, en aansluitend hierop, departement, is typisch Tom zeker ook zijn rol binnen ons departement. Toen ik bijna 5 jaar geleden naar Maastricht kwam, wist ik aanvankelijk niet waar L en L voor stond. Geen idee. Nou, dat staat dus voor lief en leed. En Tom speelt daar al jaren, samen met een aantal andere collega's, een belangrijke rol in. En zoals onze filosoof des vaderlands, Johan Cruijff, zou zeggen, dat is logisch. Want Tom is als betrouwbare en zeer sociale collega bij uitstek geschikt voor L&L-activiteiten binnen ons departement. En daar plukken we met z'n allen al heel veel jaren de vruchten van. Maar typisch Tom geldt zeker ook voor zijn rol als onderzoeker. Het kwam eigenlijk bij de verdediging al ter sprake. Tom is wat mij betreft gemaakt voor onderzoek op het snijvlak tussen theorie en praktijk. Nou, dat klinkt misschien simpel, maar dat is het zeker niet. Het vergt een stevige portie doorzettingsvermogen. En dat zit bij Tom wel goed. En het helpt ook enorm dat, net als binnen LNL, je enorm betrouwbare en sociale persoon bent. Tijdens je onderzoek heb je namelijk met vele tientallen professionals te maken gehad. Individueel, in groepen, op allerlei manieren. Dat zat ook in je presentatie. En dat ging allemaal heel soepel. En nogmaals, dan denkt u misschien, simpel. Dat is het echt niet. Dat weet ik uit jarenlange ervaring. En zeker in de coronaperiode, ja, dat hebben we ook nog gehad, was de dataverzameling niet altijd makkelijk. Maar je bleef daar heel rustig onder, tenminste dat leek zo, en ging stug door.
Maar we moeten dan ook zeggen dat er kanten aan het doen van onderzoek zitten die je niet zo leuk vindt. Wij, gekke academici, blijven vaak tot in de treuren schaven aan die ene zin in de introductie. Maar zo niet Tom. Tom zegt dan, als er geen verdere feedback is, dan is de zin dus goed en dan laat ik het zo. Die, zoals je zelf eens verzuchtte, endless cycles of feedback zijn nu grotendeels voorbij. Met het behalen van je PhD en de eerste publicatie in Technovation. Een resultaat waar wij, maar in de eerste plaats ook je co-auteurs, heel trots op zijn. En dat brengt ons bij een ander aspect van je werk. En daarmee blijven we helemaal binnen het thema van je dissertatie. Het samenwerken met Tom is altijd een feestje. En congressen zijn sowieso een hoogtepunt van het jaar. Op dat soort momenten is Tom niet alleen een heel prettige collega, maar wordt het ook echt gezellig. Tijdens een borrel in een nogal vreemde bar in Berlijn, tijdens Euroma, sprak Tom deze woorden: "We are lucky to be here, just for this reason, beer." In het brede netwerk van Nederlandse en internationale onderzoekers valt Toms werk en houding in positieve zin op. En dat levert ook nieuwe mogelijkheden op voor samenwerking in netwerken in de toekomst. En Tom is dan ook een uitstekende collega om iets samen mee te organiseren. Een voorbeeld is ons nationale congres WION in Lunteren, dat hij ook mede met ons en collega Frank Roosmeijer heeft georganiseerd afgelopen jaar. En vanwege een andere oud-collega van professor Vos, ook genaamd Tom, werd hij daar al snel gedoopt tot Tom II of Tom. Maar voor ons sta je toch echt op nummer 1.
Tja, sorry Wendy. Die Tom is een collega van de Vallen. Maar dat brengt me wel op een leuke anekdote. WION is altijd in januari. En zoals mensen die daar vaak zijn geweest, vaak hebben we dan sneeuw in Lunteren. Maar dit jaar was dat niet zo. Maar kregen we op de terugweg naar Limburg wel te maken met een heftige sneeuwval. En Tom bleef ijzig kalm. En heeft ons veilig thuisgebracht, want ik zat bij hem in de auto, een rit van ongeveer 4 uur. Nogmaals, mijn hartelijke dank. Maar goed, netwerken. Robert had het al even over dat netwerken en dat is voor mij sowieso typisch Tom. Ja, dat kwam ook heel goed van pas bij zijn rol binnen die projecten, Smart Packaging en Marconi, de Navy. In beide projecten waren meerdere partijen betrokken. En op deze plaats willen we ook alle betrokken bedrijven, partners, bedrijven, overheden daar hartelijk voor bedanken. Maar ze hebben dat onderzoek niet alleen mogelijk gemaakt, dat is natuurlijk heel prettig, maar wat veel meer is, ze hebben het ook samen met ons mede vormgegeven.
Kortom, Bartman en Robbie hebben de afgelopen jaren een toptijd gehad als jouw begeleiders. En we gaan die samenwerking ook zeker een passend gevolg geven. Maar nu is het eerst tijd om met familie, vrienden en collega's van deze mijlpaal te genieten. Van harte proficiat, Dr. Tom Schiefer.
Mijn naam is toevallig ook Tom en ik heb nimmer mijn naam zo vaak horen vallen als vandaag, maar het klopt allemaal. Dear Dr. Schiefer, also on behalf of Maastricht University and School of Business and Economics, I congratulate you with the degree that you have acquired. And before I close the session, I'd like to give the floor to Professor Demeter to hand over her congratulations to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I really congratulate you again for the huge work you did and for the degree you obtained. And I really wish you the best for the future. I hope we can still meet at conferences and discuss further your ideas on this field. Thank you.
Lot.
Thank you. Okay, herewith I close the session. Ja, we nemen hier een foto. Ja, foto hier. Zo. Moet je parallel